Norman Cross was a prisoner of war camp, one of the first modern prisoner of war camps during the Napoleonic Wars, beginning of the 19th century. And this chicken, this cockerel, I think we actually know the specific species, it's a white bantam, I think it is. This cockerel was made by a French prisoner of war in Norman Cross, one of a range of decorative items that were made by the prisoners during their internment in the early 19th century. They were actively encouraged to produce these items to keep their hands busy and to allow them to have a little bit of income. They would sell barter, or they would sell things to the local community. Most of these items are sort of decorative things, boxes and mirrors and frames. I think there's only one cockerel. I think this is a one-off. I'm not quite sure what it's for, and it's a fantastic rendering of a kind of everyday, very familiar animal. Now, I said that any one of these objects in the show, there are stories behind them, and when you kind of hear those stories, these objects change and become that much more interesting, hopefully. Now, in this case, think this is a prisoner who's making this. Blades, craft tools, are not things that you have readily to hand in a prison. So the Norman Cross prisoners were making objects like this using, it seems, improvised craft tools. Sharpened nails, bits of broken glass made into tools, and they were using bones because they could recover bones from the kitchens in the camp. So this exquisite object is made, it wasn't the worst prison in the world, but nonetheless it was a prison made without access to standard craft materials, made without access to standard tools, and becomes, I think, all the more extraordinary because of that.
Sort of major presence in here is this is Calcutta, from HMS Calcutta, a figure from who we know was made in 1831 in India of sort of an Indian hardwood, which you can still get a look at if you come up and look on the inside. Was a boat that travelled back and forth from Britain to India and until 1908, when it was decommissioned, and at that point was taken apart and the figurehead was removed. It was for a time in the sort of back garden of the Lord Admiral of the Navy, I think.
Yeah, the figurehead was removed and it was a retirement gift for an admiral whose name I forget, yes. And it stayed in his garden until a couple of years ago. Yeah,
for many decades, and probably deteriorated a fair bit. So he's been just recently restored, and we discovered him in Portsmouth at the Royal Naval Museum, and he was quite a challenge to even get into the building.
Figure made, in this case, by a named maker. We know who made this, which is Jessie Maycock, who was a master thatcher from Oxfordshire, who created this effigy using traditional thatching techniques. This is not a corn dolly. This is the techniques used here of folding and binding and pegging straw are the same as you would use to create thatched roofs, and the figures that you would create to kind of finish off the finials on thatched roofs. So it's a kind of centuries old, maybe thousands of year old craft tradition being used to create a figurative object. And it's a representation of King Alfred. Now, what's slightly surprising is that those traditional techniques are being applied to a figure that was created as recently as 1961 and created for a rather odd context, which was the commemoration board of the University of Oxford. So this and a number of the objects in the showcase and elsewhere in the exhibition, I think, kind of throws up a rather disorientating, intriguing juxtaposition of tradition and the modern world, the authentic and the kind of artificial. And I think creating this figure in the post-war period, when there was that revival of traditional crafts, including straw crafts, it tells us about how a notion of folk tradition and folk history were being kind of recovered and invented in the post-war period. The Museum of English Oral Life, where this object and a number of other exhibits comes from, have interviewed Jessie Maycock's family, and they tell us that Jessie Maycock didn't actually even like creating the figures, the finial figures, on thatched roofs, because it's a way of letting water seep into thatching, which obviously you don't want to do because you've thatched a roof. So this wasn't something that he'd ever done before. I'm not sure he ever did it again. It's kind of a one-off moment of creating this kind of strange, almost primitive figure.
Combination here of order and chaos. I think that there's a sense of allowing things to speak for themselves, but also grouping them quite informally and on occasion formally. And the exhibition really raises fantastic questions, and I hope that it will be seen as such in terms of thinking about what art is, what it is in Britain, who makes it and who it's for.